Welcome to Faith Vocals. My name is Faith. A while back I put out a short asking the question, what is truth? And of course in these YouTube shorts you only get a minute, so I didn't really have a lot of time to develop my thoughts about why I put out this short. I was just basically asking questions, hopefully getting people to think about what they understand about the definition of the word truth. I thought today I'd kind of elaborate on that, flesh out my thoughts and why I put them into a video without the limitation of 1 minute in order to get the entire thing done. I wanted to look at the definition of the word truth. What is it that we're expecting when we are describing truth, when we use that word? And the example that I used in my short was, what if you had a neighbor who came to you, let's assume you're a parent, and your neighbor says, your kid broke my window. So you go to your kid and you sit them down for a conversation and you say, please tell me the truth. Did you break the neighbor's window? So what are you asking for when you ask your kid for the truth? I feel like we have an intuitive understanding of what we're looking for. We and our child should both know what it is that we're looking for when we say, please tell me the truth. But I wanted to look at the implications of the statement, please tell me the truth. Because there's a popular view of truth in our society these days called postmodernism. The idea that truth is unknowable, that we've got maybe a perception of reality that could be distorted for a number of reasons. Some of us have vision problems, and vision is a important factor in how we view the world. That's one of our most important senses. Or maybe we've been raised a certain way to think in certain lines that are not true. Our parents passed on false beliefs to us, and that affects how we interpret the world around us. Or maybe society is wrong about a concept, and we're ensnared by our societal programming about what is true and what is not. And so there's it's popular for people to challenge the truth, to do what is commonly considered not to be true, to break those societal perceptions, just in case they might get through to the truth on the other side. And I think it's good to experiment. I think that society has a lot of stuff figured out, so you want to be careful about those experiments. And I think you want to not just assume that that you're going to find something greater on the other side by breaking past those societal perceptions. But I'm not saying don't experiment. Of course, my view of truth, I think, is a pretty standard one. And I've heard it's called the Correspondence Theory of truth. So the idea is that I believe truth needs to correspond with what is real. And for the sake of this conversation, we can assume that truth and reality may not necessarily be the same thing. When you're asking your child, tell me the truth, you're not asking your child to make up reality, to create reality with whatever they say. It's not like your child can say, no, the window's not broken, and then a broken window magically refabricates itself into a whole window. That's definitely not anything that anyone would expect. I think most of us would think, well, my child has got to say what is real. If the child broke the window, hopefully the child would actually tell me that the window is broken. Otherwise, the child would be lying, which is the opposite of truth. I've heard of a couple other theories, which I think are pretty interesting. Not that I agree with them, but I think it's interesting. They're interesting to play around with in my head. There's a coherence theory of truth. And from my understanding, I've just heard about these from the surface. So if you're more familiar with these theories, please comment and educate me. But the coherence theory of truth, from what I understand, is the idea that truth needs to cohere with the beliefs that I already have. And I think the assumption is that the beliefs I already have are already true. It gives the believer, the person, the subject, credit for already having come up with true beliefs. Of course, that's not my view, and I kind of scratch my head at it because I think it doesn't quite get all the way to the bottom of the question. Let's say that the definition of the word truth was beliefs that cohere with the beliefs that I already have. So you know something is true if it already fits in with your mental framework. Well, naturally, the belief that you got just before this belief that you're testing for truth, the belief you already got had to cohere with the beliefs you had before, and the belief before that had to cohere with the beliefs you had before. So for one thing, you've got to be a consistent human being, and I think a lot of us human beings are not consistent. What happens if an inconsistent belief gets into your framework? If there's a belief that you're saying, I've got this cognitive dissonance, there's something that doesn't quite fit, but I still hold on to it. So that is one of my beliefs too. So now you've got a contradiction in your mental framework, but the new belief that happens still coheres with the contradictory belief. Maybe a lot of the beliefs in your head are coherent, are together, but this new belief still fits with the contradictory belief. It still coheres with one of the beliefs that you have in your head. So is that true now, even though you're starting to develop a greater body of contradiction? And then, of course, I think the intuitive question I have is when we're infants, when we come out of the womb and have our first belief, for one thing, is that even a question to ask? Even is that even fitting? And I'll get to that. Is our first belief true if there's no other beliefs to have? Now, someone could argue, well, you come out of the womb believing that your next breath is going to keep you alive, or something like that. There's beliefs built into us because we've got to function. You come out of the womb believing that what your mother feeds you is good for you, that kind of thing. And these are beliefs that an infant doesn't really process, doesn't really understand. It's just functional. So I think that may not be a wholly informative question whether the first belief is true. I think the contradiction question is interesting, because I do think people are contradictory. Sometimes we do take on beliefs that do not cohere with the rest of our body of beliefs. So I would be very curious if you're more familiar with this theory of truth, if you could comment and describe some of the thoughts behind it, some of the arguments behind it. I think that would be an interesting conversation. There's one more theory of truth that I've heard of that I think is interesting, and it's not that truth needs to correspond with reality. It's not that truth needs to cohere with our original beliefs. It's that truth is what's pragmatic. It's the pragmatic theory of truth. So truth needs to be, whatever is true is going to be the most useful thought for me to believe, the most useful thing for me to believe. So it may be true that what I would consider truth, what corresponds to reality, is not very useful to believe. If you're in a life and death situation, and the truth is that you're going to die, by my standard, by reality, in the next few minutes would dictate that you're going to die. Is it helpful to believe with that conviction that you're going to die, or is it more helpful to believe I still have a chance, I can still live, and then you'd have the energy to fight? It might be useful, but then again, based on my view of truth, if you are actually going to die, there's nothing that belief is going to do for you. You are actually going to die. But as long as you don't know, you may as well believe that you've got some reason to live, and maybe that would give you the energy and the resourcefulness to continue to fight. So it seems to me like that would be the pragmatic thing to believe, is that you're going to live regardless of whatever winds up being reality in the future. I wonder, I don't, I haven't really found a strong resistance to the pragmatic view of truth, other than I believe it's just not true. But I'm curious about how that point of view would relate in a conversation about truth. Say someone like me with a correspondence view of truth, it gets into a conversation with someone with a pragmatic view of truth, and we're trying to talk about what is true, and is it true that the window got broken, that kind of thing. Maybe if the window in reality is broken, it would be most useful to believe that it is broken so it can be fixed. Again, there's something there that doesn't quite get down to the bottom. I think maybe this is a bias because I've got a correspondence view of truth. I'm going, yeah, but what does the real world say? And so if we're just picking views that cohere with our original views, or if we're just picking beliefs that are merely pragmatic, then there's a layer of reality that we're still not touching. And then maybe the postmodernist would say, yeah, we can't touch it. But as a Christian, because I believe the Bible is a reliable source of truth, and the God who wrote it is the most reliable source of truth, and he communicates with us and wants us to know him, then I come with the assumption that reality is actually knowable. It's not untouchable behind our wall of perception. But anyway, about the pragmatism, I think it's an interesting question. If I were to get into a discussion with a pragmatist, you get a correspondence and a pragmatist truther in a conversation talking about truth, is it more useful for the pragmatist to believe that truth is actually corresponding to reality in that conversation? Or is it more useful for the pragmatist to believe that truth is more useful? For the sake of having a conversation, for the sake of conversing with someone like me who believes that truth is based in reality, if someone who is a pragmatist and they're trying to have that conversation, for the sake of that conversation, especially since I argue correspondence theory is the most popular theory of truth, is it more useful to believe that truth corresponds with reality? Or for the conversation, is it more useful to believe that truth is whatever is most useful to believe? Now, I would suggest, if you've got someone hard-headed like me who's going to believe that truth corresponds to reality and isn't going to be willing to say that truth is whatever is most useful to believe, it's going to be hard to have that conversation if you don't get your terms together, if you don't both agree. So if the other party, the conversation is not very agreeable, is going to stick with their own point of view, truth corresponds to reality, then I think the most useful thing for the pragmatic person might be to assent, for the sake of the conversation, that truth corresponds to reality, even though they believe that truth is whatever is most useful for them to believe. So then at least for the moment, for the conversation, the truth, based on the pragmatic view, the truth is that truth corresponds to reality, because it's the most useful thing to say. So the truth about truth is that truth corresponds to reality. And then what happens once they leave that conversation? Because the truth is that truth corresponds to reality, right? So doesn't that follow out of the conversation? Wouldn't that continue to be true? So I might be reaching here a bit. Someone might say, no, that it wouldn't follow outside of the conversation. So I'd love to have that conversation. If you happen to have a pragmatic view of truth or understand that thought process better than I do, that sounds like it would be very interesting to discuss. A lot's been going on in my life lately. I've had to dedicate my thoughts and efforts to a lot of different other things than the channel. So this video is not as prepared as I would like it to be. I think the subject of what is truth is a big one, and I'd like to keep covering it in probably one or two more videos. So I will be revisiting this. I will not be revisiting this next week or the week after. We're going on a family vacation, my household is, And so I will not be able to put in the time and effort to producing a video. It's a camping vacation, so who knows about internet connection, that kind of thing. And then I'm going to need the time after the vacation to prepare for the video. So I'm going to take one more week after that just to make sure that my thoughts are well in order for the next video coming up, which I expect will continue to be on the subject of what is truth. I may try to approach the subject from my Christian point of view to say, what does the Bible say about truth? I believe the Bible is a very, at the very least, is a very important book in society. It has shaped the majority of at least Western society and had an impact, I think, worldwide. So even if you don't believe the Bible, it might be good to know what the Bible says about truth, so that if you're engaging with people like me who believe in it, then you have a better understanding of how to respond to us. So that may come up in the next video. I'm still plotting that out. But for now, God bless you.